Today we're going to lecture on chapter 2 of the textbook. Um, Today we're going to explore a fascinating and complex topic, how Americans have understood, interpreted, and remembered their religious past. This isn't just a story about what happened, it's also a story about how different generations have told that story and why those interpretations have changed over time. We'll begin with one of the most influential observers of early American society, and we'll trace how scholarly understanding of American religious history has evolved from the 19th century to present day. So starting with Alexis De Tocqueville, in 1835, this 25-year-old Frenchman published a book called Democracy in America, that would become one of the most cited works about American society ever written. Now, it's important to understand that Tocqueville didn't come to America to study religion or democracy. He was actually sent by the French government to study our prison system. But what he encountered here struck him so profoundly that he expanded his investigation to encompass the entire character of American society. What impressed Tocqueville most was what he called the general equality of condition among the people. He saw the United States as a model of democracy, one that could teach valuable lessons to Europe's established nations. But here's what's crucial for our discussion today. Tocqueville approached America with a specific worldview. He was a firm believer in divine providence, and he interpreted American democracy as a gift from God. In his view, the United States represented the progress and promise of God's will on earth. This providential framework shaped everything Tocqueville is observed. When he described the geography of North America before Europe colonialization, he saw a vast and beautiful landscape that seemed prepared to be the abode of a great nation yet unborn. Notice the language, prepared. This wasn't a neutral description. It was an interpretation through a lens of divine purpose. And what about the people who actually lived here? Tocqueville's views on Native Americans revealed the limitations and biases of his perspective. He believed indigenous peoples were placed by providence amid the riches of the New World only to enjoy them for a season. They were merely there to wait until others came. This is a troubling statement, one that frames colonization as part of a divine plan and relegates Native Americans to temporary placeholders in someone else's story. Oh, it's doing that thing. Sorry. You gotta check that out. Let me go back for a second, just so you guys can get that. These will be online later today as well. For Tocqueville, the real story of America began with the arrival of Anglo-Saxon colonists from England, particularly the Pilgrims who settled at Plymouth. He saw these Puritans as arriving with their national characteristics already completely formed. This is significant because it suggests a kind of cultural determinism, the idea that American democracy was essentially imported from England rather than developed in response to New World traditions or conditions. Tocqueville described Puritanism as more than just a religious doctrine. He saw it as corresponding in many points with the most absolute democratic and republican theories. In his telling, the Puritans came to North America seeking freedom, the freedom to live according to their own opinions and worship God in freedom. This narrative became incredibly influential. It presented American religious history as fundamentally about Protestant Christianity, about freedom, and about democratic ideals. It's a story many Americans still tell today, but as we'll see, it is also a story that leaves out enormous amounts of complexity and diversity. Now, to his credit, Tocqueville wasn't entirely blind to the darker aspects of American society. He recognized what he called great evils directed at Native Americans and African Americans. He predicted that the Indian nations were doomed to perish and acknowledged that oppression has at one stroke deprived all citizens, or has deprived the citizens of Africans of almost all the privileges of humanity. He even anticipated the Civil War, foreseeing great calamities between North and South over slavery. But here's what revealing. Despite acknowledging these groups of victims of oppression, Tocqueville wrote almost nothing about their religious beliefs and practices. His commentary on religion focused almost exclusively on white Christians. He observed a multitude of sects within American Protestantism, but claimed he had seen no country in which Christianity is clothed with fewer forms, figures, and observances than in the United States. Our source material notes that on this point, Tocqueville was just plain wrong. Why? Because he was looking at American religion through an incredibly narrow lens. He saw what he expected to see, a relatively unified Protestant culture, amidst the rich diversity of religious expression that existed among Native Americans, enslaved Africans, Catholics, Jews, and even within Protestant communities themselves. Tocqueville's interpretation wasn't unique to him. It was reflected and reinforced on a broader cultural narrative that dominated the 19th century. Historian David Sahat has also described this era as characterized by a Protestant moral establishment. This is a crucial concept for understanding American religious history. Despite what we often hear about religious freedom and separation of church and state, the early American Republic was not, in practice, a land of equal religious liberty for all. Protestant Christianity wasn't just culturally dominant, it was institutionally privileged in ways that diminished the rights of religious minorities. Consider what this looked like in practice. State governments provided financial support to selected churches. Citizens could be prosecuted for blasphemy or violating Sabbath laws. Legal frameworks favored some religious organizations over others. Public schools required Bible study and Protestant prayer. The First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which we now understand as creating a wall of separation between church and state, wasn't consistently applied or enforced during the antebellum period. Catholics, Jews, Mormons, and others faced discrimination, not just socially, but legally. This wasn't religious freedom, it was Protestant hegemony with limited tolerance for select others. Some historians have described the rise of Protestant dominance in terms of an evangelical empire. This language captures both the expansive reach and the power dynamics involved. The early 19th century saw what's known as the Second Great Awakening, a period of intense religious revival that swept through American society. Methodist, Baptist, and Presbyterian and Congregationalist churches experienced explosive growth during this period. Revivalist preachers traveled through urban and rural areas alike, holding camp meetings and converting thousands. This wasn't just a spiritual phenomenon, it was also a social and political movement that shaped American institutions, values, and power structures. The evangelical empire influenced education, moral reform, politics, and cultural norms. It established a framework for understanding American identity that tied together Protestantism, democracy, and national destiny in ways that seemed natural and uninvitable to many white Americans. Now, here's why our story becomes a story about stories. The way scholars have interpreted American religious history has changed dramatically over time, and understanding that evolution helps us see how academic knowledge is constructed and contested. The 19th century approach to American religious history was dominated by what we might call church history. These were often celebratory narratives written from within Protestant traditions, emphasizing the triumph of religious freedom and the special role of Protestantism in American democracy. They reinforced Tocqueville's providential interpretation in the narrative of America as a Protestant nation. But scholarship doesn't stay static. Our source material notes that moving away from exceptionalist narratives of religion in America is a relatively new phenomenon. What does this mean? Exceptionalism is the idea that America is fundamentally different from and usually superior to other nations, often in ways attributed to divine favor or unique cultural characteristics. But in recent years, especially under the President Trump administration, exceptionalism has made its appearance again through the Make America Great movement. For much of American history, both popular and scholarly accounts portrayed American religious development as exceptional, more free, more diverse, more tolerant than other societies. This exceptionalist lens shaped the stories which we were told and which we were ignored. It centered Protestant experiences and marginalized or erased the religious lives of Native Americans, African Americans, immigrants, and religious minorities. Modern scholarship on American religion looks very different. Today's scholars emphasize diversity and pluralism. They examine the religious experiences of groups that earlier historians ignored or minimized. And they ask critical questions about power, privilege, and whose story gets told. This shift reflects broader changes into historical methodology and in society itself. The civil rights movement, feminist scholarship, post-colonial studies, and attention to voices from the margins have all influenced how historians approach the American religious past. Rather than assuming a unified American religious experience, contemporary scholars explore multiple, often conflicting religious worlds. They examine how Native Americans maintained and adapted their spiritual practices under colonialism, and they trace the development of African American Christianity and Islam. They study immigrant religious communities, new religious movements, and the experiences of religious minorities. This isn't just adding more stories to an existing narrative, it's fundamentally rethinking what American religious history is and whose perspectives matter. Our source material notes or makes an important observation. The religious past of the United States is a contested topic with a long history of revision. This is worth pausing on. History isn't a settled body of facts that we simply discover and record. It's an ongoing interpretation of the past that reflects the concerns, values, and perspectives of each generation. Different groups have different stakes in how American religious history is told. Those who view the past through what our text calls a combination of nationalistic and Christian lenses often resist revisionist scholarship. They see the movement away from Protestant-centered exceptionalist narratives as an attack on truth or tradition. We will probably watch a video at some point this semester as well with some of those that resist the revisionist scholarship, just so we can get a perspective on both sides. But from an academic perspective, the revision is essential. It's how we move toward more accurate, more inclusive and more complex understanding. The tension between different interpretations, between those who see America as a Christian nation with a divine mission and those who emphasize religious diversity in the experiences of marginalized groups, remains very much alive in contemporary debates. The final dimension of our topic today involves what scholars call civil religion, the ways religious symbols, language, and rituals are incorporated into our national identity and public life. Our source material indicates that we should take a critical look at civil religion of America and the ways in which religion has been memorialized and revised in the public sphere. Civil religion isn't the same as any particular religious tradition. It's a kind of sacred nationalism that sanctifies the nation itself. Think about phrases like God bless America or the invocation of divine providence in presidential speeches, the religious language in the Pledge of Allegiance, or the memorial and commemorative practices that surround national holidays. Civil religion can serve unifying functions, creating shared symbols and narratives, but it can also obscure real religious diversity and privilege certain traditions over others. When public memory emphasizes a Protestant founding narrative, for example, it can marginalize experiences and contributions of other religious communities. So what should we take away from today's lecture? First, we should understand American religious history has changed dramatically over time, moving from providential and exceptionalist narratives toward more diverse and critical approaches. Second, that these changing interpretations aren't just academic exercises. They reflect and influence how Americans understand themselves, their nation, and who belongs in the American story. Third, that the religious past remains contested terrain. Scholars, politicians, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens continue to debate what American religious history means and how it should be remembered. As we continue through this course, I want you to think critically about the narratives you encounter. Ask questions like whose perspective is being centered, whose experiences are being marginalized, what assumptions underlie this interpretation, and how might different groups tell this story differently. The history of American religion is richer, more complex, and more contested than any single narrative can capture. Our job as students of history, or of this religious history, is to engage that complexity with intellectual honesty and critical awareness. So with that, that is the end of the lecture for today. We are going to watch a couple of videos as well. Okay, so that's going to be it for class, but here is your assignment. We are going to do a debate style. Well, I didn't change that. We're not going to have a quiz yet on chapter 2. We'll probably do it. And well, prepare for the quiz in chapter 2. We'll have a strictly chapter 2 quiz. All right. But our discussion paper for Monday is the First Amendment, freedom from religion, meant to keep religion out of all of government, or to keep one particular religion or Christian denomination from controlling government. We'll have the debate. I'm actually going to, in a way, assign the side of the debate that you're on. Whichever side that you're on, in your paper, come up with like your main statement, and then 3 or 4 points of what supports that statement, and then maybe some questions for maybe the opposing view, and then we'll break into our groups on Monday, and you'll do a lot of the the consolidating and coming up with the best argument. So the 2 choices will be no religion, which means keeping religion out of all of government, or denom, so for denominations to keep one particular religion or Christian denomination from controlling government. Up here, I have some slips that say no religion. On the back table, I have some slips that say denom. You will get to pick which side of the argument or debate that you would like to be on. But if 12 people rush up here and grab no religion and you didn't make it up here in time, then you're out of luck and you have to be the other one, or vice versa. So go ahead and grab your slips, and we'll see you on Monday.